Hello everyone and welcome to lesson 23.2C. I've entitled this video Independence and Equal Rights of Southern Africa. This video is going to cover pages 707 to 709. Independence and Equal Rights. French rule in Madagascar ended in 1960, making it the first Southern African country to gain independence. Britain granted independence to Malawi and Zambia in 1964 and to Botswana and Lesotho in 1966. Swaziland and Mauritius gained their freedom in 1968, and Seychelles in 1976. Elsewhere, however, freedom was more difficult to achieve. Question 1. What was the first Southern African country to gain its independence in 1960? Madagascar. Question 2. What did Malawi, Zambia, Botswana, Lesotho, Swaziland, Mauritius, and Seychelles, what did they all gain from 1964 to 1979? They gained their independence, their freedom. The end of Portuguese rule. While other European nations gave up their African colonies, Portugal refused to do so. Revolts for independence broke out in Angola in 1961 and in Mozambique in 1964. The thousands of troops Portugal sent to crush these revolts failed to do so. By 1974, the Portuguese had grown tired of these bloody and expensive wars. Portuguese military leaders overthrew Portugal's government and pulled the troops out of Africa. Angola and Mozambique became independent countries in 1975 as a result. Fighting continued, however, as rebel groups in each country competed for control. Mozambique's long civil war ended when a peace agreement was reached in 1994. Peace was not finally achieved in Angola until 2002. Question number 3. Unlike the other countries in Europe, which European power did not want to give independence to their African colonies? Portugal. Number 4. What were the two main reasons why Portugal had grown tired of the wars to keep their colonies in Africa? Because they were losing a lot of lives, it was bloody, and money. It was too expensive. Number 5. What event finally pushed Portugal to pull their troops out of Africa? Well, the Portuguese military leaders finally overthrew the Portuguese government there, and so they said, "Yep, it's time to leave." Question number 6. What happened to Angola and Mozambique once Portuguese soldiers left? They became independent countries. Question 7. Why was peace difficult to find in Angola and Mozambique, even though they had won their independence? Because you had a lot of different rebel groups, each vying for power. So once the Portuguese left, we had all these groups who felt like they deserved to be in charge. And so there was a lot of struggle for who would get control of the countries. The birth of Zimbabwe. After granting Malawi and Zambia independence, Britain prepared to free neighboring Zimbabwe, then called Southern Rhodesia. The colony's white leaders, who controlled the government, instead formed a country they called Rhodesia and continued to rule. Rhodesia's African population demanded the right to vote. When the government resisted, a guerrilla war began. In 1979, the government finally agreed to hold elections in which all Rhodesians could take part. Rebel leader Robert Mugabe was elected president, and Rhodesia's name was changed to Zimbabwe. Question number 8. What happened when Britain wanted to give independence to Southern Rhodesia? Well, the white leaders there in that colony said, nope, we're going to take control of the government instead. Question 9. How did the people of Rhodesia win their independence? Well, they demanded the right to vote, and when the government said no, they started their own guerrilla warfare. They started to fight. They fought back, and eventually they were able to get the government to give elections. They won the election, and that was that. Question 10. When Rhodesia won its independence, what name did they change the country to? Zimbabwe. Equal rights in South Africa. After independence, the growth of South Africa's mining and other industries depended on the labor of black Africans, who greatly outnumbered the country's whites. The white minority government stayed in power by limiting the black population's educational and economic opportunities and political rights. English South Africans controlled the government until the end of World War II. Then a strike by more than 60,000 black mine workers frightened white voters into electing an Afrikaner government in 1948 that promised to take action. Afrikaners are the descendants of the Boers. They speak a language called Afrikaans, which gives them their name. Question 11. What unfair practices were going on in South Africa after it won its independence? Well, the white government was the one running the country, and they were limiting the black population's educational opportunities, their economic opportunities, and their political rights. Question 12. What group of people took over the government in South Africa in 1948? The Afrikaner government. The new government leaders began enacting laws that created a system called apartheid, an Afrikaans word meaning apartness. Apartheid limited the rights of blacks. For example, laws forced black South Africans to live in separate areas called, quote, homelands. People of non-European background were not even allowed to vote. The African National Congress, or ANC, an organization of black South Africans, began a campaign of civil disobedience, which is disobeying certain laws as a means of protest. The government's violent response to peaceful protest caused the ANC to turn to armed conflict. In 1962, ANC leader Nelson Mandela was arrested and sentenced to life in prison. Question number 13. What does the word apartheid mean? It means apartness. Question 14. What were two ways that apartheid discriminated against black South Africans? It limited their rights. They had to live in certain areas called homelands, so they were told where they could live. They had to be separate from the white people living there. And secondly, they were not allowed to vote. So those are two major discriminations. And in our country, the United States, we have gone through this in our country's history as well. Question 15. What does the word civil disobedience mean? I found a clip for you for this one. That is the active refusal to obey certain laws or demands and commands of a government, and it's done in peaceful ways. Question number 16. Thinking question. Which famous African American leader practiced civil disobedience in our country in the 1950s and 60s, exemplified by his I Have a Dream speech? I hope you all know the answer to this one. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Question 17. Who is the famous leader of the ANC who was jailed, quote, for life for his leadership against apartheid? And I say, quote, for life because he didn't stay there the whole time, but he was there a long time. That is Nelson Mandela, pictured here. By the 1970s, apartheid-related events in South Africa had gained world attention. Countries began placing embargoes, or bans on trade, on South Africa. Meanwhile, the struggle in South Africa grew more intense. In 1989, South Africa's president, P.W. Botha, was forced to resign. In 1990, the government under Botha's successor, F.W. de Klerk, began repealing the apartheid laws. Mandela was released from prison in 1991. In 1993, a new constitution gave South Africans of all races the right to vote. The ANC easily won elections held in 1994, and Mandela became the country's president. In 1995, the new government created a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Its task was to ease racial tensions and heal the country by uncovering the truth about the human rights violations that had occurred under apartheid. Question 18. What does the word embargo mean? It means you ban or you prohibit commerce and trade with a particular country. You hit them in the wallet. Question 19. How did countries around the world pressure South Africa to end apartheid? They placed embargoes, and when a bunch of countries did this, it really hit South Africa in that wallet, and it really hurt their economy. And so under this financial pressure, they eventually did get rid of apartheid. You'd like to think they did it because it was the right thing to do, and it was the right thing to do, but unfortunately, it took that economic pressure to get them to stop it. Question number 20. How did changes begin to happen in South Africa in the late 1980s and early 1990s? Well, what you saw is, first their president resigned, and then the new government began slowly repealing or taking back the apartheid laws. Question number 21. What happened to Nelson Mandela in 1991? He was released from prison. Question 22. What amazing thing happened in South Africa in 1994? Well, now that they all could vote, they won elections, and Nelson Mandela went from being a prisoner in South Africa to being the country's president. Question 23. What were the two goals of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was created in 1995 in South Africa? Number 1, to ease racial tensions in South Africa. And number 2, to help the country heal by not hiding but uncovering the truth about what had happened under apartheid and trying to, information is a powerful weapon to help people realize bad things that had happened and to make sure they don't happen again. Well, thank you for watching. Before we go, I do have a meme for you today. It's one of my favorite Far Sides that helps explain a lot about why people can act the way they do. Here we have a figure. I'm guessing you can tell who it is. And just to make it interesting. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.